There we go. And it says we're recording. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to mute everybody and then Mike can unmute himself and make some introductions. Okay.
Right. Okay, well.
No, too late. Mike. Oh dear. Sorry, Mike. You'll have to unmute yourself again.
Okay.
There you go.
Great. Okay, Alistair, thank you very much for doing the technical wizardry this evening, and a very warm welcome to everybody. It's nice to see so many, which is fantastic news. A special welcome to our visitors this evening, including Dr. Helen Wickstead. She's an archaeologist from Kingston University, and if anybody wants to look at her profile on the university website, it's quite interesting. I'll say no more. I think we may have been joined by Alice Harper from Bath. Alice, you're very welcome. Nice to have you join us. Alice's grandfather was Douglas Wood, and he was a member of the Record Society in the 1950s. And I think he was working hand in hand with Dr. Tom Bowes. So hopefully Pete can mention a little bit of that later on this evening, which will be great. Pete, I know this is your first talk to the Record Society. Hopefully it's one of many, and we very much look forward to hearing what you've got to say. But I just wanted to say before we started off that Pete's actually been a great help to the Record Society, a great asset over the last few years. And he'll remember warmly, I'm sure, moving boxes of fossils and flints out of one room into another, into the backs of our cars, along with other people helping as well. But I really appreciated that, Pete. So that's at all. Yeah. And I look forward to hearing to what you've got to say this evening, as I'm sure everybody else does. So if I can hand over to you,
right.
Please.
Okay, I will share my screen. Need to let me share my screen, Alistair. Can you hear me, Alistair?
Alistair, you're on mute.
Yeah, Alistair needs to share. Let me share my screen.
Right, I thought I had allowed that. Okay.
Going to be some
is it still not letting you do it?
Let me try it. Okay, I'm ready. Okay. So.
Yeah.
Can you?
That's it. All done. So I will.
I've just got to sort a few things out here, and I'm ready to go. Right. Hello. Can you all see my screen which says Dr. Armstrong Bowes? So let's put your thumb. Good. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yep. So thank you for joining. So I'm Pete Knowles, and for many years now, I've been collecting and studying prehistoric flint tools that are often found along our coastline. And I'm doing this research now as part of a doctoral research project at Durham University. Now, also at the beginning of last year, I started collaborating with Dr. Helen Wickstead from Kingston University. Now, Helen is an archaeologist and a senior lecturer in museum and gallery studies. And together we began studying the archives of Dr. Tom Armstrong Bowes in a hope that it will reveal vital information about the Seaside Museum's collections. And then, as you all well know, England went into lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But we found a way to continue working on the project at a distance. I digitally recorded the archives and sent the files to Helen, and remotely we examined over 3,500 pages of 9 scrapbooks and over 1,000 pages from a set of 35 lecture notes and other archive material from a Records Society and Museum founder, Dr. Tom Armstrong Bowes. So this evening, I'll give you an overview of these projects, how these collections and archives are still contributing to original research, and some exciting discoveries we've made. So who was Bowes? This is a caricature of Tom Bowes, which looks like it was taken from the Flintstones cartoon. And it was found in one of his scrapbooks, which I'll tell you more about later. But sadly, there are very few photos of Tom Bowes. And in the caricature, there's a few things that might give us a few clues about him. Start, he's sitting outside a Stone Age hut, which has got Conservative Club inscribed across the window. So I wonder why that is. And he's got some French implements on the floor, these making reproductions, and some packages that said Highstead, Rickholder and Fulwich on them. And it's also his pet dog, Paulinus. And I think this is probably named after the Roman missionary who came to Kent in 601 AD to assist Augustine in converting the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. So Bowes was a very religious man. He was also a lifelong Conservative supporter, and he collected flint tools. So there's a few things in there about him. So what do we know about him? He had a long life, which as far as we can tell, he lived entirely in Herne Bay. He was born in 1869 and died aged 84 in 1954. He was educated at Epsom College, and he had his medical education at Cambridge. And then he went into general practice in Herne Bay with an elder brother, Charles. So he was a local GP. He was also a noted local historian, collector, and fellow of the Society of Antiquaries of London. He held senior positions in many local clubs and societies, including Cricket Club, Tennis Club. He was president of the Bible Society, Historical Record Society, and the unique men-only club, the Fortnightly Club. I think we have a few members here tonight, so welcome to them. And it was from the Fortnightly Club that the movement for having a local museum and reference library emerged. So he was also a co-founder and instrumental in forming the Herne Bay Record Society, which set up the objective of acquiring items which were of interest to Herne Bay for exhibiting to the public and were worthy of preservation. He gave magic lantern slideshows and lectures to numerous clubs and societies, organisations and museums. Was he an archaeologist? Well, not by modern standards, no, but he was involved in some very amateur excavations, and he was a collector of antiquities, and he corresponded with archaeologists nationally and internationally. So this is also not him. It's a display that is no longer in the museum, and it was my first introduction to Bowes, really, when I visited the town museum many years ago now with my children, and they were both intrigued and freaked out by him in equal measures, and would often say, "Can we see that funny man in the corner?" So it was a diorama showing Bowes in his study, surrounded by books, paleolithic implements, mammoth's teeth, magic lantern, and a box of slides. That's another image of that, and I think it's a shame that's not there anymore, because what's become increasingly apparent through this research is, and what hasn't really been recognised, is that one of the biggest assets to the museum is actually its own heritage, but I'll talk more about that later. So this is a picture of Tom's father, Dr John Bowes, who was born in 1834 in Workingham, Cumbria, and he founded a medical practice in Herne Bay in 1859. He also had many civic roles in the town, including being a justice of the peace. And the Bowes family was a large family, and Tom had 5 brothers and 2 sisters. And his brothers all went in to have various professional roles, including 2 doctors of medicine, but we don't know what his sisters did. And the family also put on amateur theatricals to aid funds for the Bird's Nest, which was a children's holiday home in Brunswick Square. So the family is well known and respected locally. So for most of his adult life, Bowes lived at 7 Marine Terrace, which is the house just to the right of the white bollard on the right. And he lived he had his surgery and dispensing chemists at the back, and then he moved to Charles Street, 15 Queen's Garden when he retired. So this is a view which is probably from around the time Bowes was a boy in 1870s. In one of his lectures that we looked at, titled 60 Years of Herne Bay, he described that in his very youthful days, there was no seawall, and in the company of his brothers, he says, "Barefooted, we raced down the path from the house and across the narrow asphalt parade onto a grassy slope, and then hid behind the groins and had stone fights." Well, probably sort of thing still goes on today. And he also told of boyhood adventures to Bishopstone Glen, and he noted that as a boy from Marine Terrace, you could only just see the tops of the Reculver Towers above the distant Bishopstone cliffs. Yet in his lifetime, the headland just past Bishopstone had eroded so much that the towers were now fully visible. And this is obviously a view we now take for granted. And this is just another quite a nice short aerial photograph of Central Parade circa 1920. And with the sea defences now built, and you can imagine Bowes was in his house studying, or more likely out on one of his GP rounds in 1920. That's another view of both 6 and 7 Marine Terrace. And he wrote a letter to the Herne Bay Press in 1947 about the gardens on the front, in which he said, "My father occupied 6 and 7 Marine Terrace from 1859 to 1908, and then I did until 1935. And we two, in sequence, for 45 years, were responsible for collecting the amounts due from the tenants or owner for living in his own house, and for paying the cost of maintenance, the path in front of the house, and the approach at either end of the terrace, painting the railings and keeping the gardens in order. And the grass was cut and the tamarisk and other shrubs trimmed and the flowers planted. The hollyhocks thrived there, and from the many varieties of colour were the admiration of both residents and visitors." So we get a bit of a view of what he was like and how long he lived there. And shame it's a black and white picture, because the hollyhocks look pretty good in that. And this is an up-to-date picture, and you can see the tamarisks are still neatly pruned. Tom's house number 7, the Aqua one. I took that during the first national lockdown in 2020, and you can see support for NHS signs in the window. Right, so I think this is quite a delightful photo, and it's one of the very few of the Bowes and his family and staff. It's taken on October the 8th, 1934, in the back garden at 7 Marine Terrace. Now, I spoke to one of Bowes' only known surviving relatives, his niece Pitley Tappin, and she kindly helped me identify some of the people in the photograph. So we've got the gentleman at the back on the left is an interesting character. We think that is the pharmacist, T.A. Bennett, and he was also the lanternist for all of Bowes' lectures, produced the photographs and slides, and he also gave a couple of lectures himself. Then we're not sure who the other two gentlemen are in the middle, but Bowes is there, third from right in the back, looking rather jolly in this picture. Next to him is his son John, only son, who sadly died in the war when the bomber he was piloting was shot down and crashed in Holland. And throughout all the archive, there is no reference or mention to that. So he obviously didn't want to dwell on that or recall it for some reason. Next to John on the far right at the back is Robert, his brother, and also his best man and the town solicitor. And the middle row are the housemaids, who Pitt described as being straight out Downton Abbey. I wouldn't know because I've not watched that, but I believe her. And then there's the practice nurse on the right. And the bottom row, we've got Gertie, Tom's wife, is on the left. And the other ladies couldn't be identified, but Pip suggested they must have all been visiting as they're wearing hats. At the very front is Tom's dog, Paulinus. So what of his collection and archive? Is the collection of scrapbooks, lecture notes, lantern slides, letters, catalogues, books and papers, ancient pottery, and prehistoric flint implements. Now, if Bowes is known for anything at all outside of Herne Bay, it is for his collection of prehistoric flint implements. And within the archive, there were several ledgers that catalogue Bowes' collection of prehistoric stone implements. And these catalogues, together with his photograph album, have enabled me to evaluate the extent of the original collection, which is pretty impressive. And I established that it was housed in a series of 17 cases that contained a total of 3,800 artifacts. Now, sadly, the remaining collection is less than half of that. There's about 185 in the current Herne Bay Museum, and there's 1,500 in the British Museum, and the rest are missing. Goodness knows where they've gone. Anyway, so the archive has revealed that the archaeological collection that he amassed was so large that for many years he housed it in a room which was once a classroom of the original Herne Bay College, as seen in this lithograph print. So the first Herne Bay College was in St George's Terrace, and his lifelong friend, Captain Eustace Turner, was also the headmaster, so that may have been part of the arrangement. So from an early date, he'd instituted a private museum, and this was all prior to going into the town's first museum in Mortimer Street. However, we don't know anything about the collection and its time in this premises and whether it really was a private museum. We do know that many people had seen it and were talking about it, so I guess it was viewed by people at some point. And that's another view of the seafront, and I think it's just out of shot on the edge, the old Herne Bay College, but it's quite a nice aerial shot, 1920. And you still got the bathing machines being used on the front there, even at that time. So here is an example of some of the flint tools in Bowes' collection. And this is what is known as an assemblage. It's a collection of similar artifacts from a particular site. And this particular assemblage was collected in the 1920s, came from an old brick earth pit just to the west of the old Whitstable Canterbury branch line, St Stephen's in Canterbury. And it is this collection that will radically transform our understanding of the early human occupation of Britain. And I'll tell you a bit more why in a minute. So before I had a chance to study the archaeological collection, we managed to find Bowes' scrapbook of flints. I've been looking for this for years. So it's of the flints from Fulwich, and it was thought to be lost. And there was only a poor photocopy made in 1970, which was left in the British Museum. But with the help of Mike, Margaret and Alistair from the Record Society, a scrapbook was found, and I made a complete digital copy of it. I think there's about 300 odd implements in it, but it's quite an extent. So some of the photographs are quite badly damaged, as we believe the album was damaged in the museum when the museum was flooded in the North Sea inundation in 1953. I believe it was that one, and a lot of the collection was stored in the museum basement. So that was also another major problem for the Bowes' collection, because what he'd done, he'd written all his accession numbers and site codes on gum labels, and a lot of them were washed off in the flood. So that meant the provenance of the items was lost, and their value to contribute to science was also thought to be lost. But the vast majority of the pages in that book are actually in really good condition. With some photo editing, I've been able to restore them. So importantly, you can see the labels and numbers. And this is another example. There's a very distinctive lower middle Paleolithic hand axe in the middle there. And so the reason Bowes' collection from Fulwich is important is that it's the only collection from that site. And the site represents one of the oldest and least understood phases of human occupation in Britain from a period of potentially over 500,000 years ago. So these weren't modern humans, they weren't even Neanderthals, they were species before that who were walking around and living in our lands. So, yeah, so last year, January 2020, Helen and I were able to view some of the 1500 Bowes implements, and that seems like a lifetime ago now. So this is in the British Museum, but it's not the museum at Great Russell Street, Bloomsbury. It's their huge annex where they keep all their artifacts, called Thanks House, and it's in the less glamorous Shoreditch. So you might have already seen that hand axe that was in that photo album is there in the box, bottom right corner. So we're well on the way to finding stuff that was thought lost. So that's a hand axe that's in the album I've just shown you. And though Bowes made careful notes of the provenance of his paleoliths, that information was also thought long lost, because what he'd done, he'd used a cryptic numbering and notation system to hide the location of where the implements had come from. So nobody knew where they come from. However, one of the first things I discovered in the archive was a notebook with a table that enabled me to unlock all the codes. And we now know where all these implements come from. There's at least 35 sites in the Stour Valley. So that's really important, because we can now start to use these to understand the early humans in this area. And it shows what enormous value there is in old collections still. Next slide is a little bit technical, but bear with me and it will become clear. So nearly 100 years ago in 1925, a geologist named Henry Dewey and an archaeologist in the British Museum, Reginald Smith, suggested that the flint tools found in the deposits of the Thames represented evidence of different human cultures over many hundreds of thousands of years. And they wanted to prove their theory and thought the Stour Valley in Kent would be a good test. But the sequences were too difficult for them to interpret. But now we've got this new methods of dating stuff, which is called marine isotope dating. So that chart just shows the fluctuations. On the left, there's a chart shows fluctuations in temperature. And what we've established is that there is different shapes of hand axes corresponding to different periods. So I put up here an idealized sequence of the Stour. So each one of these steps is very roughly 100,000 year cycle. So the river Stour cut down through the landscape, leaving remains behind high up. So you get different hand axes at different heights. So the full, which ones are really crude, the Reculver got different edge profile and the different ones from Sturry. And then there's that new assemblage from Canterbury that wasn't known about. So what I'm going to do in my research is try and disentangle all this mess and sort it all out and work out if there really is a sequencing technology. So that's a project for the next few years, and Bowes' collection is absolutely pivotal to that. So what else have we got? His archive contains a unique set of 35 lecture notes. So we already said it's about 1,000 pages, and he delivered 60 lectures between 1930 and 1950. And he gave lectures to at least 30 different groups and societies, mostly in Herne Bay. And some included like the Angling Society, Bible Society, Mothers Union, Women's Guild. And during the wars to both the central and western fire stations. So that was used to be the 2 fire stations. And the lectures show that he didn't just focus on local issues, but included topical subjects drawn from the national media. The lectures have titles as diverse as Umbrellas, My Hat, Herne Bay in the Past, Some Spiders, The Extinctions, Sea Encroachment, Erosion at Herne Bay. And this is just an example of how his scrapbooks are related to his talks. This is pages from 1937, 1938, including a very early cutting of newspaper, of television. So the subjects of lectures to male audiences were actually different to those given to mixed or female audiences. And he gave most of his lectures to the unique men-only fortnightly club, which was especially important as the club encompassed nearly all of the museum board. And here he gave 19 lectures in total, and these were lectures that were maybe more intimate reminiscences and light-hearted discussions on taste, fashion and habits. And the lectures, some of the lectures were titled, well, one was titled Lipstick and All That, which was about history of makeup. Another one was called The Greatest Pleasure in Life, which is a lecture about food. And he had a talk on Malaya, which may have given him opportunities to discuss City Hill and her romance with the Sultan of Johor. So it's evidence here that these closed talks gave middle-class men who are active in public life opportunities to discuss all sorts of stuff they might not normally get to talk about. So also lectures were given as fundraising opportunities, a sample which is the windmill at Herne, and this is the cover for that lecture note. So yes, that lecture he delivered 6 times, and in the front cover there's a list of all the places he delivered it to: Literature Society, Herne Bay College, Congregational Church, Museum, Wesley Guild Library. So and it's also got a date when he wrote the lecture notes, and it's 1929. Now, in this year, he says that the condition of the sweeps on Herne Mill was giving rise to anxiety. Therefore, he put together the notes and delivered a lecture in January 1930 to initiate interest and to gather subscriptions. He managed to raise £75, which is about £8,000 in today's money. But unfortunately, the mill needed further work to support the weight of new sweeps, and there was no plan to do this. So he had to return the money to all the donors, except £10 from an anonymous lady donor, which he kept until the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings took the mill in hand some 5 years later, and he then passed the money on. And here's the windmills of Herne Bay today, which I think Bowes would approve of. That's a photo I took on a trip out to the Mansell Sea Forts on the Greta sailing barge. Well worth doing if you haven't already done it. So this is an example of the invitations that were sent out for his lectures. So the Herne Bay Record Society, as it was then, sent out this invitation in 1933 for a lantern lecture at the museum, Mortimer Street, at 8 o'clock, by Dr. T. Armstrong Bowes on ancient pottery in the museum. So we've got the lecture notes for that. We've got newspaper articles talking about the lecture after the lecture, and we've got photographs for it. So we've got quite a good archive there. But in 1933, Bowes gave a lot of attention to one particular issue, and this was the menace of the muskrat, an invasive species that was spreading rapidly through wetland areas and was found in the Culver marshes. So we have a full archive of slides for this and the lecture notes, so it could be rerun, but I don't think it's the most interesting lectures, but I'll give you a few examples for it. So he'd start his lantern shows with, all shows with a curtain opener, and then something to get your attention like rats. And then there's some nicely drawn pictures as he talked about Hamlin and how the town suffered from rats. And for this lecture, he had 57 slides and 39 pages of notes, all sorts of pictures of rats, basically. And this slide is of a muskrat that was actually caught in the Culver marshes, now stuffed and in a glass case in a museum store. So we've got a complete multimedia archive on muskrats, including Turksey Derby muskrat, photographs, 22 pages of newspaper cuttings on that subject. So it is a unique archive. And here it is today. So what does that tell us about Bowes and the museum collection today? Well, it is an example of Bowes leading a campaign against invasive species in the district, and it's what today we'd call environmental activism. Also means that the archive begins to give artifacts in the museum that seemingly had no importance a whole new level of significance. So it's really quite important. Okay, right, scrapbooks. Going to get into these a bit more now. There are 9 large format scrapbooks covering the period from the 1920s until his death in '54. And as you've already seen, they're an eclectic montage of all Bowes' interests, and a record from a period of great social change and scientific advancement, discoveries of our past and the rise of modernity. And there are numerous cuttings relating to his lectures. Now, before looking further into his scrapbooks, I want to go off on a bit of a tangent now. So just to give you a bit of context to the period. So what's that doing? No connection with Bowes or Herne Bay, or so I thought. So yeah, the scrapbooks start in the period known as the Roaring Twenties. It's a decade of boom and bust. So this is a Type 35 Bugatti, and it is one of the most exotic cars of its day. And when I started preparing this presentation, I was going to say that I doubted that such a piece of exotic machinery had ever roared through the streets of Herne Bay. And this is kind of where you go off and do some research, you can go off on a complete tangent, and I was completely wrong about that. Also, what's interesting about this car is that owned by an archaeologist who has a tenuous link to Bowes, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So in 1925, there was the Herne Bay Speed Trials. And so that's quite a nice photograph of a Mercedes with the bath houses in the background and the old Herne Bay College off to the left. So we're not sure if Bowes was a fan of this. And there are very few references to motorsport in his scrapbooks. There are, however, numerous references to speed records, such as Sir Henry Seagrave's Golden Arrow, and a lot of cuttings relating to automotive accidents, which may not surprise you if he's a GP. Anyway, it turns out Bugattis were very much present in Herne Bay for that particular speed trial. In fact, Motorsport magazine described it as Bugatti Day, and there were numerous class wins for Bugattis, and particularly a lot of class wins by lady entrants. And what is actually quite extraordinary is that the finish line was just past where those people were standing, and the fastest cars are crossing the line at close to 80 miles an hour. Bearing in mind that's a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit now, so times have definitely changed. Anyway, that first Bugatti I showed you was owned by the archaeologist that was later responsible for restoring Stonehenge at Avebury. It's this chap, Alexander Keeler, who's heir to the Keeler Marmalade Company, hence all the money for his fast cars and archaeological excavations. And I can't begin to think of any archaeologists in that position today. Now, also at this time, interest in archaeology was at a peak, the recent discoveries of the Null Valley at Luxor by Howard Carter. And this is a photograph just recently been released, actually, an in situ photograph of Tutankhamun's burial mass in the freshly opened sarcophagus. And it's an amazing photograph because it was actually black and white, it's been colorized. And most colorized photographs I've seen are a bit naff, but these are pretty amazing. And there's another one there from inside the tomb of Carter and a worker examining the solid gold sarcophagus. I think they're really amazing photographs, but what have they got to do with those? Well, also at that time, as I said, you know, it's the Roaring Twenties, decade of boom and bust, there's the general strike. And that's a copy of the Times and the general strike that was in Bowes's scrapbooks. So how does that all relate to Bowes? Well, rather tenuously, but it does bring me to this rather interesting looking document that was in the envelope on the first page of his first scrapbook. And it's a letter from the Society of Antiquaries of London, Burlington House, Piccadilly, giving notice of the ballot for candidates for election to the Society. This was all happening during the strike in 1926, and it states it may not be possible to communicate to fellows any variation in arrangement. And you notice on the ballot, if you can see it, number 3 is Alexander Keeler. And on that occasion, he wasn't elected, he was blackballed. He did subsequently get elected, but Bowes was elected. There he is, number 5, Bowes from Marine Terrace. And there is also notice of an extra meeting on recent excavations at Luxor by Howard Carter. So whilst this document doesn't link Bowes to these people, and it doesn't really have any wider significance, I thought it was at least interesting to see it's on the same page as some of the more notable archaeologists of history. So this is the first page of his scrapbook. Doesn't look particularly interesting, but what it is, it's a microcosm of all his interests and beliefs. And the one page encapsulates him, and what we now see is the juxtapositions of science and religion. And the page includes literary quotations, verses from the Bible, newspaper cuttings on earlifts, the obituary of a geologist, and an article on bathing machines, and a list of Charles Eggleston's A Saunter Through Kent with Pen and Pencil. And prominently, he's written in a quote, and it's a quote from an essay of man by Alexander Pope. It says, "The proper study of mankind is man." So it's quite interesting he's put that all there on the first page, and you see what's in the rest of the scrapbooks. So the first article in Bowes's scrapbooks is a paper by Arthur Keith on the phases in the evolution of man. And there are many articles by Keith throughout the 9 scrapbooks showing that Bowes was a keen follower of the renowned anatomist and fellow of the Royal Society. And then there are numerous pages of cuttings and articles on an announcement of the Piltdown discoveries, which Keith considered confirmed his theories, with which he would later become strongly associated after he reconstructed the Piltdown skull. And Bowes's affinity for Keith's science was probably due to the fact they were both medics who worked as general practitioners. And of course, we now know that Piltdown was a forgery, but the scrapbooks contain many fanciful illustrations like this one from the Illustrated London News, which was an illustration of how Piltdown Man may have looked. There's also this one portraying Rhodesian Man, or probably now more correctly known as Homo heidelbergensis. And also at this time, all the illustrations were only of primitive men, not people. And then there are images of contemporary tribal people, and this amazing image of the Hiken Bushmen of the Kalahari, described as the men and women of the world's most primitive race swarming over the magic wagon. It's quite an extraordinary image. And things like this, headhunters of the unexplored swamps of Dutch New Guinea. So the descriptions are all very much of their time, but these are sort of things Bowes liked to collect in his scrapbooks. And then there's this nice article on the discovery of rock art at Gilf Kebir in the Libyan desert by Count Al-Nashi. And he entered popular imagination in the film The English Patient. And his scrapbooks also are a compendia of every kind of living creature, past and present. And this is I believe a straight-tusked elephant, and we've obviously found straight tusks have been found on the foreshore near the clock tower. And then there was mythical beasts like the abominable snowman, and 50 pages alone devoted to the Loch Ness Monster. and archaeologists such as Dorothy Garrard and Chiquita Hawkes, labelled here as Mrs. Christopher Hawkes. And articles on contemporary archaeological finds were scattered throughout the books from start to finish, indicating his lifelong interest of all things from the past. And this one is on the finds at Sutton Hoo. And there's a really nice new film. It's only on Netflix, actually. It's called The Dig. It's all about that. It's worth watching if you get it. And there's some articles on the Spee records that were held off Herne Bay in 1945. And, we just missed the 75th anniversary of that last year. That kind of went unnoticed and other events going on. So there's articles on an astronomical event, such as when the Aurora Borealis was seen from Herne Bay in 1882, which is randomly placed next to a share certificate for 656 shares in Herne Bay Pier Company. More articles on comets seen in the northeast sky from Herne Bay, and randomly placed next to a picture of one of the sea forts. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe he thought it would be a good astronomical viewing platform. Anyway, that just gives me an excuse to show my photograph I took last year of Comet Neowise seen over Herne Bay. Summer last year, July, I think, about 11:30 in the evening. Long exposure. You can see the boats blurred in the background, but. And then there's also some original artwork within the scrapbooks, including this painting by Tom's brother, Harold, who was actually an architect. So really nice original pictures in the scrapbooks. So what of the Herne Bay's first museum? Very few photos of it. Mike has provided a lovely set of pictures. This is the outside. It was established in 1932 by the Herne Bay Historical Records Society. It's in the old Plymouth Brethren Chapel in Mortimer Street. The president was Sir William Wayland MP, the chairman was Dr Bowes, and the honorary curators were William Stedman, who was a very interesting guy. He was a retired head teacher and archaeologist from Northfleet. And there was also some local chap, Charles Welby, who contributed a lot of things to the museum. So what we've been able to do, what I've been able to do with those photographs, pretty much reconstruct that first museum. We got 75% coverage of what the interior of the museum was like. And, you know, it looks like a jumble, but I think it's great. And I wish all museums are like that. I'm sure everything's carefully positioned to have meaning, significance. You can see, I don't know if you can see photograph one, there's the top sort of left of that photograph, there's the muskrat still in the museum. So lots of the stuff in here we can still relate to and find in the current museum. There's some stuff in there, like in photograph 7, you've got an Angus pheasant. What is that doing there? It's not a local creature, but it's in Darwin's theory of natural selection. So maybe they were positioning it in the museum for that reason. And there's also a picture in photograph 7, a nice painting of Reculver that I think Valerie might be familiar with. So what else? So this is a really nice photo, and it's of a Mrs. Stone in the museum, taken in July 1934. Now, Mrs. Stone was a living caretaker, and she was in charge of all the day-to-day running of the museum. She was effectively a curator, but without the title. And all the other people we know are involved in the museum were gentlemen. And we've got this one photograph, and we really want to know more about her. We do know that she exhibited artifacts of her own at a temporary exhibition in town in 1930. So she must have had more significant role than she's been given credit for. So we're hoping that, well, we don't even know her first name. And we're hoping that maybe the Historical Records Society can help with this. Is she mentioned in any minute books? Is she in the Kelly's directory, census search? Because she lived in the basement of the museum from 1932 to 1939. So we hopefully will be able to find more out. Right. Okay, back to the scrapbooks. This is where it actually gets quite exciting. So this is from scrapbook 4, it's page 71. And it has proved to be the most interesting as it contains 2 significant letters, which I didn't realise at the time I was photographed, because I had to photograph all these 3,500 pages. I couldn't look at everything in detail. So When I completed digitising the entire collection, I sent all the images to Helen in South London, and she diligently trawled through them. Now, then one night, I was losing concentration from viewing far too many pages of the scrapbook. Helen recognised the distinctive signature at the bottom of the letter. You might have spotted it. C.H. Darwin. So it is an original and unknown letter by Charles Darwin that has been unrecognised in the Herne Bay Historical Records Society's archive for nearly 70 years. And at this point, as far as we were aware, nobody else knew of its existence. And bear in mind, this was in the middle of lockdown last year. So we immediately contacted the Darwin Correspondence Project. The Correspondence Project has been going since 1974, and it's trying to collect all correspondence associated with Charles Darwin. There's 12,000 articles so far. So we contacted Rosemary Clarkson at Cambridge University, and we didn't have much to go on with the letter. Their address was Dear Sir, and the handwriting was largely illegible. But Rosemary immediately got back to us saying that after 15 years, it was still exciting finding a new letter, and it was indeed a genuine letter from Charles Darwin. So she recognised the letterhead at once, and she said that it was Darwin only used it between 10th of May 1871 to the 8th of January 1872, and the letter was written on the 31st of August. So this meant it was a letter for a covering letter for Darwin's article in the Gardener's Chronicle concerning the fertilisation of Leschane Altea, which is this plant from Australia, in this beautiful image here. And the recipient was Maxwell Tilden Masters, who was the editor of the Gardener's Chronicle, which published significant articles by Darwin, including his famous brief reply to Patrick Matthews concerning the latter's claim to have published the theory of natural selection first. Now, incidentally, Maxwell Tilden Masters was born in Canterbury, and his father, as well as being a nurseryman, an alderman, and mayor of the city, also founded Canterbury Museum in 1823. So there's some interesting links going on here. So why did Bowes have that letter, and what might he have done with it? Well, certainly the letter connected him to a great figure of natural history, and it also supplied him material for one of his jokes. In his 1935 lectures to the Fortnightly Society titled Nuisances, Human Otherwise, he talks about bad handwriting, and he stated, I have an autographed letter of Charles Darwin in which he says his handwriting is so bad that a proof of an article should be sent to him before it appeared in print. Otherwise, be inclined to hurl the missive on the fire rather than to trouble to elucidate the contents. And this is what basically the letter says, but it's rather ironic because Bowes' own handwriting is really awful, and I particularly struggle to read items in his archive. So the other letter on that page is from Sir Arthur Keith, and as we've seen, Bowes was a keen follower of Keith, and Keith's letter to Bowes is the only evidence that they communicate in person, and it doesn't suggest that Keith knew Bowes, because for example, he actually addressed him as Mr. rather than Doctor. Nevertheless, Keith replied, thanking him for the Darwin letter and saying he had no doubt the letter was to the Gardener's Chronicle, as he had seen a similar letter. So that page of the scrapbook is actually difficult to interpret, why it's placed there, what the other items are. And next to the letter of Darwin is a photo of Tom Clark, who's the town's first black and white minstrel. Also not visible, but underneath the letter from Keith is an early photo of the clock tower. And there's also a picture of Henry Oxenden. Now, George Chichester Oxenden was his son, who wrote on the fertilisation of orchids and also corresponded with Darwin. So there may be something there, but there's a lot of mysteries, and we still don't know how Bowes acquired the letter. So, but it's great to find that. So, kind of bring it to the end really, and the obituary, where the vicar said in his eulogy that from a human and temporal point of view of life, they mourn the passing of a good man and a man of spiritual and intellectual culture, a somewhat rare combination. So sort of a nice ending. So what of his legacy? The collection is contributing more now than ever it has, and the letters from Darwin and Keith are far from the only valuable and interesting items being rediscovered in the collection. The Darwin Project, Rosemary's transcript of Darwin letter, will be published in a supplementary volume in 2022. Yes, so study the museum we're working on a publication to reveal more about the context and history of the Bowes archive. There was quite a nice paper out a couple of years ago about Paleolithic collections in museums, and they talked quite a bit about Bowes's collection in that. And I've got a paper coming out this year about this particular hand axe called a Ficron, and that's going to be quite significant because it's that's from the Canterbury site, and it's that collection that's really important. And Bowes actually described this as, he said, magnificent, probably the world's finest specimen, and it probably is, and that's now back in Herne Bay Museum. So there's my doctoral research, which hopes to answer a 100-year-old question. And yeah, Bowes' collection is central to that research, and it's still contributing to the research into human origins. I think one more slide or two. So 21st century cutting edge technology. I've made some photogrammetric models, so you should be able to see a video of a hand axe moving. So what we're going to do is scan these hand axes and put them through a computer program to work out their shape. So that's something I'm doing for my research. And for the future. So once we've got a couple of scholarly papers published on the archive and collections, it's going to put the society in a good place to get some funding for conservation projects, maybe proper digitization, indexing, web searchable, and maybe a good proposal to have an annual Bowes lecture on science, natural history, prehistory of local area, or something like that. So that's my talk. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Pete. That was very good. Very good. You did very well there.
Thank you.
Absolutely fascinating.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
The scope of what you've covered in that 45 minutes, absolutely amazing. And well, I commend the work that you've done, and long may it continue. So if there are any questions, if you'd like to unmute yourself, and I'm sure Pete would be raring to go with a potential answer.
I've just got a comment. However, did he have time to see his patients, or was he so well off he just, picked them here and there? And also, it would have given him an opportunity in the patients' houses to see if they had anything interesting.
I think that's how he got a lot of his stuff, actually, from visiting. But most of that collection is actually made once he retired, in 30 or 40 years after he retired. But yeah, but I think the doctors weren't so pressed. They did have more free time. It's a different world.
They're certainly pressed at the moment.
Yeah, there's a lot there. It's
not there, so you can do it. Have you done it? No.
Peter, whereabouts in Fordwich were all the flints found? Were they all in one place? Yes,
we think it's one gravel pit, which is at the top of the hill near Stobmarsh Road. And it's backfilled and used as a rubbish tip in the last war. But yeah, we need to go. None of them being found. They were all quarrymen collected them and took them to a dealer in Canterbury where Bowes actually got them from. So he didn't actually get them from the site. That's an important bit of information we found in the archive, actually, that we didn't know about.
Pete?
Yeah.
That hand axe that you've shown us, it looks a pretty unique shape. Are there many about that, like that?
Interestingly enough, there's one other one that's known of, very similar, which came from a place called Cuxton near Rochester. And that was found about 10 years ago. So there may be a cultural comparison between those two sites, but it's from a period about 280,000 years ago. And what's interesting about it is it seems to be made more for a pleasing shape rather than for practical use. There's a lot of effort being put into that. And this is at a time where we thought humans didn't have that capacity for abstraction like that. So it's very interesting.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
Pete, the painting, the famous painting, you didn't mention it. Have you come across the box with newspaper cuttings in it that Harold Goff collected?
I haven't seen anything from Harold Goff's stuff yet. That would be very
Oh,
interesting
right.
to see that.
Mhm.
Anything else?
Oh, just out of interest, what would the axe that you showed, or the flint that you showed at the end, have been used for?
So
was it a fighting implement, or was it a meat gathering implement?
Yeah, they were a general purpose tool. Basically, they've been described as a Swiss penknife. They've used them for cutting, mainly cutting meat, but they could be woodworking, cutting holes in ice, digging for roots. No one really knows, really. I mean, you can make a really useful tool from just by bashing one piece of flint off, and you can create a really sharp edge. So why did they go to all that trouble to make this sort of symmetrical shaped tool? It really is not necessary for the jobs they were doing. So it's one of the unknowns, really, still, that need to be answered.
Excellent. Well, Pete, I'd like to hand over to Margaret Burns, who's going to propose a vote of thanks to you.
Well, what can I say, Pete? Who'd have thought all those few years ago when you started to dig into these archives and keep pestering us to find out what have we got, and kept coming, that what a fascinating story you would start to weave. And obviously the trail you've started is one of these unfinished ones that will go, I can see, will go on for a long, long time, because you've started to unearth things. And obviously with the help of Dr. Helen and other people, I think these archives are going to be proved to be not just nationally important, but I think internationally important. So I really, really commend you on all the really lovely work you've done. And I would say that Dr. Tom would be extremely proud of you and all the work you've done. And I would like to thank you very much on behalf of the Society for pursuing all this. And because, like a few of us know that, you know, we've done a lot, but we're at sort of the end of what we are doing. You're at the start of what you're doing, and Society for all the things that I'm sure you're going to find in the future. So thank you on behalf of us and Dr. Tom and all his supporters. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. It's been
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Margaret, and thank you, Pete. I'll just give you notice of our next meeting. This will be on a Tuesday next time, Tuesday the 16th of March, where Melanie Gibson-Barton will be speaking to us about the Belgian royal family. Not a subject I know very much about, so I'm looking forward to that. So I hope that you're able to join us. We will send out the link in the normal way via emails. So all remains is for me to stay safe and keep well, and we look forward to seeing you next time round. So thank you all very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks
Bye.
very much. Bye then.
Welcome, please.
Thank you very much.
Well done.